takes on the complicated history and politics of that place. But what I admire the most is Robbie's willingness to look deeply at the real subject of his memoir, himself. Robbie traveled to a place where he knew that he'd have to confront everything he thought he knew about culture and religion. That learning process continued when he traveled to Muncie, Indiana, where he completed his thesis, My Last Weekend in Israel, a Pilgrimage. I was the thesis director for that. And it's a journey that he'll continue when he attends the MFA program at George Mason University in Virginia. I'm very proud of him. So please join me in welcoming Robbie Maakestad.
Thanks, Kathy. So, as Kathy alluded to, my thesis tells the story of an experience I had over in Israel. This particular story is the story of my last weekend in Israel. I went on a road trip with a few of the students in my program at the university there. One of the students, named Seth, was a master's student, and he was preparing for his oral thesis, where he would have to take his thesis committee out to certain archaeological sites and lecture to the professors about each site. And so he wanted to practice instead of just winging it on his first try. So he invited me and a few other students. So the characters in this section that I'll read are myself, Seth, the graduate student, Mitch, a study abroad student from California, and a guy named Tucker, who had spent almost the entire semester in the library. And this was like his first big excursion away from the school. So this is taking place the end of our first day on the road trip. It's called Camping at Karnei, Hittin. Our car pulled to a stop in the dirt parking area for Karnei Hittin National Park. The park contains an extinct volcano cone and two peaks, one on either side of the cone, hence the English name for the site, the Horns of Hittin. It was several hours after the park had closed, but that was Seth's plan. The night was dark. The stars and the moon illuminated just enough so that I could see general shapes. Our car was parked near a trailhead that led up a hill. There were no trees, just the bare hill and what looked to be tall grass growing along rocks strewn on the trail side. Is it legal to camp in a national park? Tucker asked as we pulled sleeping bags from the minuscule trunk of the rental car. Not wanting to bear the bad news, I looked at Seth, who stood with Mitch, head turned skyward to the stars. Seth, I asked, Tucker's wondering if it's legal to camp here. No, Seth said with a grin at Tucker. It's not even illegal to be in a national park after hours. What happens if we get caught? Tucker asked. Our car's in the parking lot for anyone to see. They just tell us to leave, Seth said, looking back up at the sky. Wait, why wouldn't they arrest us? Tucker pressed. Wouldn't it be a felony? We just play dumb, Mitch said. Mitch walked back to the car, continuing. When they learn you're American, they either assume you're stupid or that you don't know any better. It's like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Oh, okay, Tucker said, looking unconvinced. Even though I had similar discomfort as Tucker about breaking the law, I knew it wasn't a serious offense, and had already decided that the opportunity to camp in a volcano cone was worth the risk of getting caught. So I didn't put up a fuss when Seth had relayed his idea to me the day before. Additionally, Israel is unlike America in that national parks are a pretty loose term. Karnei Hittin has no gates or anything that would set it apart as a national park. Only a sign in the dirt parking area near the trailhead. It didn't even have park rangers assigned to take an entry fee or control its usage. Seth approached us and smacked Tucker on the back. You ever camped before, Tux? Nope, this is my first time. Where's your sleeping bag? Seth asked, noting that all Tucker had was a backpack. Oh, Tucker said, his face falling. I didn't know I needed one. You're camping, Tux, Mitch said. You always need a sleeping bag. No worries, man, you can take mine. Seth handed Tucker a compressed nylon pack. I tossed a blanket in the trunk before we left, so I'll be fine. Seth reached into the darkness at the back of the car and produced a small wool throw. I'm ready, let's go. In July of 1187 BC, an army of 20,000 crusaders under the command of G. de Lusignan, the king of Jerusalem, marched to attack Saladin, the first Islamic sultan of Egypt, who was laying siege to Tiberias in Galilee. Due to the extreme heat of the summer, the Crusader army had difficulty traveling in their full armor, but he forced them to march for nearly 8 miles without water. Saladin, realizing that he stood between the Crusaders and the nearest water source, the Sea of Galilee, set fires to block their path, forcing them to turn toward the Horns of Hittin and camp for the night in the plain below the hill, which allowed Saladin's force of 30,000 to almost completely surround the Crusaders. In the morning, G attacked Saladin's forces in order to break through their supply of water, yet they were turned back and fled to the Horns of Hittin. The Crusaders mounted 2 final charges against Saladin's forces before surrendering atop the mountain. This defeat weakened the Crusader hold on the Holy Land and allowed Saladin to conquer numerous strongholds over the next 3 months, culminating in the surrender of Jerusalem. The battle established Islamic rule in the region and effectively ended the Third Crusade. About a third of the way up the Horns of Hittin, our invasion took us to a thin barbed wire fence, barely visible in the thick darkness. "Are we going over this?" Tucker asked. "Through it," Seth said, unhooking a wire looped over a fence post. Without the support of the loop, the weight of the fencing collapsed to the ground, allowing us to walk across the barbs, now safely mixed among the grass. Once we crossed to the other side, Seth lifted the fence, hooking the wire back over the fence post, securing the barbs in place. "Are all fences like this in Israel?" Mitch asked. "Only the ones surrounding pastures," Seth said. "That way herds can travel in and out. Makes it easy on the shepherds." Hiking up the hill proved difficult as we stumbled our way to the edge of the volcano cone, then down the slight depression between the twin peaks. "Let's look for a flat spot where we can build a fire," Seth said. "Preferably without rocks," Mitch chuckled. "When Robbie and I went camping a couple weekends ago, we picked a spot covered in jagged rocks. I'm still sore." "In my defense," I said, "I couldn't see anything that night because we didn't have a light." "Kind of like now, actually." I shuffled my feet in an attempt to gauge the condition of the ground. Rocky. "Oh, I have a flashlight," Tucker said while rummaging in his pack. Pulling out a miniature mag light, Tucker switched on the pencil-sized flashlight, shining a pale dinner plate of light onto the ground. "That's hardly a flashlight," Mitch joked. "Yeah," Tucker said, "I think it's almost out of batteries." After several minutes of Tucker strafing the ground with a small beam, he located a spot that was relatively flat and rock-free. "Let's go over to the cliff edge and gather firewood," Seth said. "Cliff edge?" Tucker wavered. Mitch laughed. "No worries, man. We won't get that close." 10 minutes later, we assembled a pile of straw and sticks at the center of our campsite that we gathered from the scrub trees near the cliff edge. "Can you hand me the matches?" Mitch asked Seth. "Oh," Seth said. "I probably should have packed some." "You mean you don't have a lighter or anything?" I asked. "Nope," Seth said. "Completely forgot about lighting it." Seth was the one who suggested we gather firewood, I thought. Could he really not think ahead to realize that we had no way to light it? After scouring the backpacks and coming up empty, Seth determined that he and Mitch would head back to the car to see if they could find anything to start the fire. I stayed back with Tucker in the darkness as Seth and Mitch needed the light to see their way to the car. "Pretty crazy that our semester's almost done, huh, Tucker?" I said. Before he could answer, some sort of snorting noise erupted from the nearby trees. "Is that an animal?" Tucker half-whispered. "I don't know, but it sounds like it," I said. We stood in silence, waiting to see if we'd imagined it, but couldn't hear anything. After a minute or two of silence, I said, "Hopefully it was just the wind or something." "So, are you glad you came?" "Yes," Tucker said in sincerity. "This has been quite an adventure so far." Again, a guttural snuffling noise grumbled out of the trees, this time accompanied by a rumble that sounded like a bear awakening. "Gosh," Tucker said, "whatever it is, it sounds big." "Yeah," I said, venturing closer to the trees and squinting into the darkness. "What do you think it could be?" "I don't think you should go closer," Tucker said. "I've heard that Israel has a ton of wild boars." Wild boars were not an animal I'd want to mess with, so I listened to Tucker and stood back with him near the pile of wood scraps. We turned and looked out across the vast array of Galilee spread before us. The scene looked like something that would be on a postcard titled "Galilee at Night." Small towns were scattered across the landscape, each illuminating a specific area like a light bright. Streetlights and houses speckling the otherwise desolate region of Israel. The stars were some of the clearest I'd seen because Galilee is so sparsely populated. They mirrored the pixelated light from the towns, nearly 20 minutes of waiting for Seth and Mitch to return, the noises were still coming from the trees. My eyes had adjusted the darkness, yet I still couldn't make out what was within the depths of the branches. "Where do you think Seth and Mitch are?" asked Tucker. "I don't know. Maybe they decided to go buy matches." "I don't think so. It's a good 30 minutes to anywhere," I said. "Maybe we should go look for them." Tucker nudged a backpack with his foot. "I don't want to leave all our stuff, so why don't you just go?" "Really?" I asked. "I don't want to leave you all alone." "I'll be fine," Tucker said. "I won't go anywhere or make any noise." Personally, I was curious to see what Seth and Mitch were up to, and I was only minimally disconcerted by the animal noises. Even so, as I headed off, I wondered if I was enacting the typical horror movie mistake of splitting up. I shuffled down the path, trying my best to stay on my feet over the rough terrain, until halfway to the car I stopped. Did I just hear that noise again, I thought? I listened, but didn't hear anything. Just as I started to walk again, I heard it to my right, a wet, throaty, snorting noise. The hair on my arm stood at attention. I picked up the pace, but then I heard the grunting on my left. There's more than one. I abandoned my careful shuffle and jogged blindly down the path. To my relief, I reached the fence without incident. Once on the other side, I walked a bit further and saw the car running, the hood up, and Mitch and Seth leaned over the engine. "What are you guys doing?" Mitch looked up. "Check it out." I moved around Mitch to get a better angle. He held a soggy cardboard box filled with hay and crumpled notebook paper, angled closely over the engine, while Seth bent over the battery, cradling what appeared to be a shard of metal over the uncovered battery terminals. "I'm trying to spark the battery into the hay," Seth said. "Oh gosh," I muttered. "What?" Seth asked. "I'm holding my pocket knife and a towel to be safe." Or what used to be my knife. He held up what I could now see was a misshapen pocket knife melted from the heat. "All right, let's do this," Seth said as he lowered the metal across the post again, showering the engine with shards of light. Mitch swooped the box, but none of the sparks caught the paper, even though he blew lightly over them. "Dang it," Seth said, again. They tried over and over without success. I watched for 5 minutes or so, then said, "Too bad Saladin isn't here to start a fire for the Christians without supplies." "Oh, shut up," Mitch said, grinning and wiping sweat. "We're gonna get this." To my disbelief, on the next try, a scrap of paper lit, igniting the hay. "Eureka," Seth cried. "Don't let it blow out." A minute later, they coaxed the ember into a small fire and walked the flaming hay to the other side of the fence. "Isn't it gonna burn up?" I asked as I hitched the fence back into place. "It's a fourth of a mile back to camp." "Give me that," Seth cried, swiping the box from Mitch and sprinting up the path while screaming, with the now flaming box raised above his head. Mitch and I ran behind Seth, trying to stay in the light cast by the flames. Suddenly, from outside the area lit by the box, I heard the animal noises again, but this time could hear a loud stampeding noise. A large cow raced across the path behind Seth, yet in front of me, then another, then another. Cows were all around us, a veritable stampede straight out of The Lion King. The cows grunted and snorted as they cut across our path, spooked by Seth's screams, which only grew louder when he saw the effect it had on the cows. Mitch and I kept up our pace behind Seth, both of us shaking with laughter at the ridiculousness of the situation. The further along the path we raced, the larger the flames grew above Seth's head. Reaching camp ahead of us, he tossed the flaming cardboard onto the pile of wood that we gathered and danced around waving his hands. "Hot, hot, hot," he shouted. "I almost couldn't hold it any longer." It was crazy, but I was thankful that we had a fire as the night had started to cool down. "Tucker," I said, "it was cows. They were all along the path and ran everywhere when Seth spooked them." "Why are there cows in a national park?" Tucker asked. Seth, recovered from the fire's proximity to his hands, said, "I guess that they must just rent it out as pasture land." "That's probably why there's the collapsible fence," Mitch said as he, Tucker, and I unrolled our sleeping bags. It was hard to believe that a national park with such a rich history was also rented out as pasture land, but I guess that's what happens to sites that don't have significance to a nation's state religion or current political situation. We hopped inside our sleeping bags while Seth curled up in a ball under his tiny blanket, each of us laying with our heads near the fire for warmth. After a bit of small talk, we fell fast asleep, tired from the day's adventures. Early in the morning, I awoke feeling uneasy. The world around me was veiled in a misty gray gloom, the sun still an hour or so below the horizon. Something felt off. I glanced at the fire, red embers glowing amidst the charred remains of the night's fire, then saw a slight, nearly imperceptible motion to my left. I looked up to see an immense cow staring down at me not 15 feet away. Her body was a light blue-gray that melded into the surrounding haze. Her legs were planted firmly, and a dried weed hung from her mouth. She looked at me with eyes that seemed about to drip, almost like she was about to weep. I stared back, discomforted. The cow stood motionless, more still than any living creature I've seen, then began to chew the crisp plant, gyrating her lower jaw, which made a slight noise. Latching onto that barely audible sound, I knew it was what had awakened me. Rolling onto one elbow, I stared into her unblinking, watery eyes as she ate the entire weed, then stopped chewing. Again, she stood still, almost lifeless. Still sleepy, I didn't know what to do. Well, she's not bothering anyone, I thought. If I ignore her, she'll probably go away. Rolling over, I pulled the sleeping bag over my head, fell fast asleep again. I reawakened at sunrise to find that the cow had vanished. I propped myself up, no sign of her. When the other guys were up, I told them about the cow, but they'd all slept through the night without any bovine disturbance. Once I packed up, I walked around our campsite in the area where she'd stood, but couldn't find any footprints. Was it an apparition, I questioned? A dream? The more I thought about it, though, the more I was sure I'd had to stare down at the cow in the early morning. After we put out the fire and packed up our stuff, we walked to the cliff edge and gazed out at Galilee, a very different view than the previous night. The expansive flat landscape was checkered with fields of different colored crops, sporadically dotted by small towns, plains swooping up to the Cenomanian limestone hills to the north. To our right, the 500-foot cliffs of Arbel split to reveal the serene Sea of Galilee. Clouds hung heavy over the water, and the hills to the north, streaking the sky with a misty gray of rain. As I looked out across the beautiful scene, I couldn't help thinking that years before, on a dry summer morning, Saladin had attacked the Crusaders on the plain before me, forced them to flee up the horns of Hittin, and then crushed them where I now stood. In the battle, scholars estimate that fewer than 3,000 of G's army survived, and that Saladin's forces suffered heavy losses as well. A massacre brought on by two contrasting religions, resorting to violence in an effort to establish themselves over one another. That's when it hit me. Just as both Muslims and Christians had invaded the Holy Land in an attempt to wrest control from the other during the Crusades, so had we in the present invaded. We forced our way into a place where we didn't belong, not caring about the moral implications, because in our minds, the end result justified the means. Similarly, I imagine Saladin and Gita Lusignan justifying their crusades based on the end result, controlling Jerusalem for their respective religion. Sure, our offense was much less severe, but it was still an invasion of sorts. As I pondered the cow staring at me, the intruder in her pasture, I imagined God, many years before, watching two armies gather in a land where they didn't belong. Religion aside, I don't believe God was honored that day by the sacrificed lives. Rather, I imagine he was grieved to see his creation snuffing out the lives of other creations. Men on both sides strove to glorify a higher power by advancing their campaign against the opposing army, but ended up bearing glorification beneath felled corpses, drowning it in the blood of the slain. The ineffectuality of their actions remains but a blip on the cardiogram of history, as neither religion has maintained control of the region, a faded memory of militaristic zeal. Staring out across the land, I admired the beauty of the sunlight as it cut through a slit in the rain clouds and shimmered off the Sea of Galilee before billows again filled the sky, shrouding the landscape in shadow.